My name is Eamonn O'Keeffe. I'm the National Army Museum Research Fellow here at Queen's College in Cambridge. I've discovered that military musicians, many of whom were returning from the Napoleonic Wars, invented the first brass bands that appeared in Britain, and they did so earlier than historians had previously believed. I think the prevailing view is that brass bands emerged out of industrialization, that this is a Victorian story, a story of miners and factory hands joining bands sponsored by their employers, who were motivated to encourage these bands because they believed that music was an uplifting, wholesome recreational activity to encourage among their workers. And there's a lot of truth to that, but what I've been able to show in my own research is that this is a Georgian story as well, that brass bands were already in evidence in Britain among military regiments in the late 1810s, that military veterans were very important in training and supporting and mentoring brass bands as they developed up and down the country from the 1820s and the 1830s. But actually, one of the other things that I think has been missing is an appreciation of how much of the template for brass bands was coming from the military, from the familiarity with military bands that people had been hearing and seeing in wartime, and the presence of ex-servicemen in communities teaching and training these bands. So the Napoleonic Wars were a traumatic and generational struggle. They lasted from 1793 in the aftermath of the French Revolution almost continuously until 1815. So this is more than 20 years when Britain is, for the most part, at war. Huge mobilization, maybe 1 in 6 or 1 in 5 men of military age were in some form of military service. And all these units have drummers and buglers and fifers and trumpeters. They form bands of music so that you see by 1814, 20,000 musical performers in the military in some capacity. And this has a huge impact on people's lives. Even though there wasn't much fighting in Britain during this period, you certainly knew you were at war from all the drums and fifes and bands. So this sort of military pageantry, this music becomes very familiar to people over 2 decades of war. It's a really tough time for veterans, but also we see some of them being able to use some of the skills that they've developed in the military in new ways, in civilian contexts. So these musical skills, these musical veterans are very active and are very often pillars of their local musical life, their cultural life. In the 1810s, we see military regiments starting to experiment with the all-brass format, and by the 1820s, that's spreading more generally in societies. And one of the earliest ones, and the ones we know most about, is created and is led by a man named James Sanderson. James Sanderson is from Northamptonshire. He had served for a long time in a cavalry regiment, so mounted on horseback. He fights at Waterloo. He serves as a trumpet major. He takes his discharge from the army in the 1820s, and then he sticks an advertisement in a newspaper saying, "My military brass band in Leamington Spa in Warwick is basically open for business," and so they're playing at all sorts of events, at ox roastings, at village fetes. They even play at a Waterloo anniversary procession where Sanderson leads the band wearing his Waterloo medal. This is not a unique story, but we've got a lot of information on Sanderson, and we can trace some of the events he's playing at. And we even know the instruments, the keyed bugles, the trombones, the trumpets that they're using. And so we know that this really is an all-brass band being played at a very early date and being led by a military veteran. I think brass bands represent community. They represent, whether that's a regiment, whether that's a village or a factory, they bear the names of their community very proudly. They're made up of people from that community or group. And they represent that community embodied, playing together, performing together, playing to others and playing to themselves. And I think that this is a form of community music making took hold in the 19th century, but we also see it today remaining pretty vibrant. But we know that there are challenges, there are declining memberships in some cases. We take for granted the fact that we can listen to music at the click of a button. That wasn't the case for our ancestors. And so brass bands are a really malleable, flexible form of musical entertainment that works really well in an outdoor context, creating a sense of festivity, hitting the right emotional notes, bringing people together.